Hello students, we are in Unit 5, 5.02, Expressionism. Go ahead and right click on that quiz and open that link in a new window. Do that now. And, whoops, get it started. And resize that window so that you can see your questions and you still have a little slider bar. And then in your other window, let's go ahead and open up the content and just make sure that you can see this video at the same time. All right. German Expressionists did not share a common style, yet their collective work revealed an intense personal response to the world around them. Before the start of World War I in 1914, German painters took the boldness of Fauvist imagery in new directions. Many artists, however, were deeply affected by the war, and their work began to exhibit a darker quality. Here's the self-portrait of Kovetz, etching on paper, 1921. Goals for the lesson: identify how specific works of modern art reflect the beliefs of their time and place. Identify distinguishing characteristics of Expressionism. World War I. Oh, actually, you know what we need to do first is read our questions so we know what we're looking for. Question 1. How did Vasily Kandinsky use expressionist line and color in Improvisation 31? He combined geometric shapes with neutral colors to emphasize light and shadow. He used the impasto technique to apply thick areas of expressive color. He combined vibrant colors with bold lines to convey his inner feelings about a subject. He used heavy outlines to define organic shapes that are filled with opaque color. Question 2. Which statement best describes the beliefs of members of Der Blaureiter? They believed that painters should capture on canvas the fleeting effects of light on objects. They believed that artists should depict forms using flat planes and simple geometric shapes. They believed that the artist's purpose was to convey spiritual truths in expressive ways. They promoted patriotic depictions of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Question 3. Which statement best describes Kovetz's approach to printmaking? Is it, she used expressive lines to convey emotions of helplessness and despair? She avoided references to current events or to her personal life? She produced multiple sketches before beginning the etching process? She applied thin washes of ink to create subtle tonal variations? Let's find the answers. World War I, the end of La Belle Époque. In the summer of 1914, Europe's long interlude of peace was shattered. The continent's major powers, divided among two alliances, plunged into war. Both sides hoped for a quick victory, but the conflict soon devolved into stalemate and the horrors of trench warfare. Casualties mounted with no end in sight. Then, in 1917, America came in on the side of France, Great Britain, Italy, and Russia. Beleaguered and exhausted, Germany and its Austrian and Turkish allies surrendered in 1918. The cost was almost beyond reckoning. 16 million dead, economies devastated, cities destroyed, an entire generation scarred by the experience. Many of Europe's prominent artists had fought in the trenches. Some were killed, others wounded. For those who survived, the world would never look the same. The joyous hues of Monet and Matisse, the cheery themes of Renoir and Seurat, all seemed like a cruel joke to people who had endured 4 years in a death-filled landscape drained of color and hope. In the aftermath of World War I, Europe art took an entirely different look. Opposing forces dug a vast network of trenches between Germany and France. Trenches along the front lines sometimes offered scant protection against enemy line. The war took a terrible toll even on those who survived. Buildings and even whole cities were destroyed in bombing raids during the war. Expressionism. A number of artists worked before, during, and after the war, made highly emotional works of art by distorting their subjects to communicate intense emotion. Art historians label their work expressionist. What was that? Intense emotion. Expressionist art. In Germany, some expressionists banded together to create formal movements. The artists of each movement experimented with new modes of representing their inner feelings. Although the term expressionism refers to art of the 20th century, Expressionist tendencies can be traced to earlier times. In his Eisenheim altarpiece, German Renaissance painter Matthias Grünwald distorted the forms and colors of the figures to communicate the agony of Christ's crucifixion. Vincent van Gogh and Edvard Munch used bold color and brushwork to express their intense feelings about their subjects. And here we have German Renaissance artist Matthias Grünwald distorted figures and colors in his Eisenheim altarpiece expressing the agony of the crucifixion. And post-impressionist Vincent van Gogh using bold color and brushwork in Wheat Field with Crows to communicate his emotional response to what he saw. And Edvard Munch's use of color line and symbolism to infuse the scream with personal feeling. Vasily Kandinsky, born to a wealthy Russian family in 1866, Vasily Kandinsky began his career as an attorney and a scholar. As a young professional, he made several trips to Germany, where he became enthralled with the bold, expressive qualities of modern art. He was so inspired that at age 30, he quit the law and dedicated himself to the study of art. He left Russia and settled in Munich to focus on his painting. Kandinsky's early works were representational, meaning that they represented things, and more were based on Russian folklore themes. Yet he yearned for a more personal way to express his thoughts and ideas, particularly his disdain for the materialism he felt was rampant in industrialized Western society. Around 1910, he began to experiment with less representational images and to cultivate a more aggressive, spontaneous style. This is Improvisation 31, Sea Battle. And can you see the ship? Der Blachreiter. In 1911, Kandinsky, along with his friends and fellow painter Franz Marc, founded an influential German expressionist group called Der Blachreiter, a German phrase meaning the Blue Rider. It was also the name of one of Kandinsky's early paintings. Members of the group did not subscribe to a common artistic style. Rather, they shared a distinct view of art making. They believed that a strong connection existed between the visual arts and music, that color had symbolic meaning, and that the artist's true purpose was to express spiritual truths in spontaneous and innovative ways. Der Blachreiter disbanded in 1914 when World War I began. Franz Marc and another member of the group were killed in battle. Kandinsky, still a Russian citizen, was forced to leave Germany. And here's The Gray Horse by Franz Marc and The Tiger by Franz Marc. And I believe there was a question in here about Der Blachreiter. Let's see if we can find it. Which statement best describes beliefs of members of Der Blachreiter? They believed that painters should capture on canvas the fleeting effects of light? No. They believed that artists should depict forms using flat planes and simple geometric shapes? No. They believed that the artist's purpose was to convey spiritual truths in expressive ways. Ding, 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 right? The artist's true purpose was to express spiritual truths in spontaneous and innovative ways. And the promoting of patriotic depictions was not mentioned either. Hopefully you got that one right. Perfect. All right, Kandinsky's Improvisation 31. Kandinsky had a deep appreciation for music. He believed there was a synergy between the painter's process of organizing line, shape, and color on canvas and the composer's process of arranging notes and other elements in a score, a musical score. He gave musical titles to many of his paintings, such as composition and improvisation. Improvisation 31 is one of a series of paintings that Kandinsky created between 1909 and 1913. In it, Kandinsky expressed his inner self with color. But what about the subject of the painting? Art historians offer a variety of interpretations. The painting's secondary title, Sea Battle, suggests that it is an abstract image of warships. Abstract meaning it's kind of twisted and skewed, not realistic, locked in combat. Kandinsky denied assertions that Improvisation 31 was a symbol of any specific war, even though he created it on the eve of World War I. He maintained that the work represents a terrible struggle going on in the spiritual atmosphere. The symbolism in the painting possibly refers to the apocalyptic text in the Bible's book of Revelation. Art historians offer a variety of interpretations of the subject matter of Vasily Kandinsky's Improvisation 31, Sea Battle, which he painted on the eve of World War I. Kandinsky maintained that his painting is not centered on that specific war, but that it represents a terrible struggle going on in the spiritual atmosphere. The symbolism in the painting possibly refers to the apocalyptic text of the Bible's book of Revelations. Ships. 2 ships engage in battle on the open sea. Smudges of diffused color suggest the ship's hulls and sails. Masts. Slender black lines define the ship's masts. Destruction. Tumbling rectangles suggest a distinct city on the brink of destruction. Waves crash against the warships. Thick black slashes represent opposing cannons as the ships fire at each other on the turbulent sea. Kandinsky's abstractions. Kandinsky's style evolved from representational, meaning that it represents something, to abstract, meaning it still kind of represents something, but it's like weird and bizarre looking and it's like hard to see that representation. It's more symbolic. To completely non-representational, meaning that the work does not represent anything. He came to believe that art should communicate the artist's inner feelings rather than merely record lifelike details. He believed that every color evokes a different emotion, from joy to anger to sadness, and he assembled striking color combinations with bold, energetic lines to convey movement and depth. Rather than show viewers exactly what a sea battle looks like, Kandinsky wanted viewers to experience its fury and force. What type of feeling do you think Kandinsky was trying to express through his color choices in his painting? Do you think representational colors would have been more effective? Why or why not? Representational versus abstract. Here's the Battle of Camperdown by Philipp James de Loutherbourg, oil on canvas, 1799. In 1799, Philipp James de Loutherbourg made this painting of a sea battle that took place during the French Revolutionary Wars. Loutherbourg took a representational approach to convey the details of the battle. With Improvisation 31, rather than create a representational image, Kandinsky distorted and exaggerated elements of this composition to create an emotional impact. Which painting style do you think best communicates the horrors of a battle, and why? 2 styles. The terms abstract and non-representational describe 2 distinctly different styles. Abstract refers to the work of artists who draw inspiration from the natural world, but who alter or simplify the subject so that it doesn't look realistic. In non-representational works, artists abandon reference to the natural world so that the lines, shapes, colors, textures, and forms become the subject. Is Kandinsky's Improvisation 31 abstract or non-representational? Well, it would be abstract because it is still representing a ship. Kandinsky's influences. With their shocking colors and flattened picture planes, the Fauves paved the way for other new approaches to painting in the 20th century. Kandinsky built on those conventions and developed his own radical style. He pushed the concept of abstraction to new heights. A Sunday Afternoon on the Island of La Grande Jette by Georges Seurat versus Improvisation 31 by Kandinsky. Kandinsky admired post-impressionist Georges Seurat's disciplined approach to color. He studied Seurat's pointillism method and he applied personal meaning to the colors that he used in his own paintings. The Red Room by Matisse. Inspired by the vibrant colors and dynamic brushwork of Fauvist painters such as Henri Matisse, Kandinsky used line and color to convey his feelings. Johanna Maria by Paul Gauguin. Just as post-impressionist Gauguin sought to express spiritual rebirth in his paintings, Kandinsky believed that his spiritually driven paintings had the ability to enlighten society. Käthe Kovetz, born in the Prussian city of Königsberg in 1867, Käthe Schmidt was part of a politically progressive family who encouraged her artistic talents. At age 14, she enrolled in private art classes and went on to study art in Berlin, where she met and married a medical doctor, Karl Kovetz. Her husband's patients would later become the subject of many of her artworks. The Kovetzes were both deeply committed to social justice. He set up his medical practice in Berlin's poorest neighborhood, and she used her artwork to champion the rights of the underprivileged. Käthe Kollwitz was attracted to the democratic nature of printmaking, a process that enabled artists to produce many copies of artworks inexpensively. For 50 years, she produced etchings, woodcuts, and lithographs that addressed themes of poverty, women's rights, and war. Käthe Kollwitz used art to champion the rights of the underprivileged. Kollwitz's self-portrait, The traumatic effects of World War I, shaped the content and style of many German artists. Käthe Kollwitz was no exception. Her son Peter was killed in the war, and for the rest of her life she suffered bouts of deep depression. In the post-war era of 1920s, Kollwitz produced intensely personal self-portraits that expressed her feelings of helplessness, despair, and the acknowledgement of the inevitability of her own death. This pose conveys her resigned, thoughtful nature, as the weight of her head rests heavily on her hand. Kollwitz was ruthless in her own self-examination, and she was admired for the direct way in which she depicted herself. "I want my art to serve a purpose," she wrote in her diary. "I want it to have an impact in this day and age when people are so desperate and in need of help." Expressionist lines. Unlike many of her contemporaries who aligned themselves with a particular artistic movement, such as der Blaureiter, Kollwitz worked independently in the Expressionist style, using Expressionism techniques to convey her feelings about social conditions and personal loss. Kollwitz relied on bold, expressive lines in deep black to convey emotion and create the illusion of three-dimensional form. Her strong directional marks are clearly visible and seem to almost vibrate on the page. In some areas, she used cross-hatching to create deep shadows, while in others, the thick black lines move in a single direction. She created highlights by leaving the paper bare in just the right places. Notice her forehead, nose, and lips. In this self-portrait etching by Käthe Kollwitz, strong directional marks are clearly visible and seem to almost vibrate on the page. In some areas, Kollwitz used cross-hatching to create deep shadows, and you can see that cross-hatching here. That's where we have lines that are crossing. And while in other areas, thick black lines move in a single direction, such as down here. She creates highlights by leaving the paper blank in just the right places, such as in her forehead, on the nose, and on the lips. So let's answer question 3. Which statement best describes Käthe Kollwitz's approach to printmaking? She used expressive lines to convey emotions of helplessness and despair. Gosh, that's the one I would pick. That's what we just talked about, isn't it? She avoided references to current events. No. She produced multiple sketches before beginning etching. Didn't talk about that. She applied thin washes of ink. Didn't talk about that either. All right, and then there's just one more question, and that's one. How did Vasily Kandinsky use expressionist line and color in Improvisation 31? He combined geometric shapes with neutral colors? No. Neutral is like pale, like beige and gray and white. He used the impasto technique to apply thick areas of expressive color. I don't know, it didn't really mention impasto, and that doesn't look like, Van Gogh's really thick impasto technique, right? He combined vibrant colors with bold lines to convey his inner feelings. Yes. He used heavy outlines to define organic shapes that are filled with opaque color. No, that's not the purpose of his work, right? So hopefully you got that, and thanks so much for tuning in. Have a great day.